listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma, and I'm your host, Trish Close. Rifino Valentine on the podcast today. He's the president and founder of Valentine Distilling Company right outside Detroit, Michigan. He talks about growing up in a rural part of Michigan, how a walk into a different gym in high school turned him on to wrestling, which then led him to Cornell, then New York City, where he was day trading stocks for almost 10 years. He says he was very successful, but it wasn't enough. A plan and a bar napkin led him to open a distilling company. This was all in 2007, 2008. So not the best time in the economy to open up a business. And he was also adamant about going back to Detroit. But he said he faced a lot of challenges, but he's been really successful. At the time, there were only about 15 to 20 micro distilleries. Now there's more than 2,000. So he really was a pioneer in this industry. His bourbons consistently rated some of the best in the world. Valentine Vodka, world's best by the World Vodka Awards in London 2 years in a row, 2016, 2017. He says no matter, though, the amount of success, he's still a micro distillery and they're still pushing and growing, and they have plans to keep pushing and keep growing. He says when it comes down to it, though, it wasn't about opening a distillery. There's something much deeper here, which he'll explain. He says he really wanted to get back to the way things used to be. Here's Rifino Valentine. Hair looks good. Hair looks good. I love your We're just going to dive in. I love the backdrop behind you. Where are you right now?
You know, what's the point of having all this beautiful equipment if you're not going to use it in an actual Zoom?
Agreed.
I'm in the production facility right now. This is our distillery.
Okay. And I see behind you a couple banners there. One says double gold medal. Woo woo. 2 double gold medal.
And then they're all over the place around here.
Okay, hair flip. They're all over the place. I can't keep up with them. Rifino Valentine, president and founder of Valentine Distilling Company. You're joining us right outside Detroit today.
That's right.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes to the podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Lots of questions for you. You've had quite the interesting life. Distilling Company kind of says it all, but it really doesn't when we're going to talk about Valentine Distilling Company, because when you started this, a lot of people probably like, what on earth are you doing? Especially when you decided to start it. But we'll get into all of that. But first, I want to know, where are you from originally?
So I was born and raised in Michigan, but about 4 or 5 hours north of Detroit. So very small town. But public school I went to, I graduated with 42 kids. So it's like a farming community. Real rural area. It's a beautiful area. Mm-hmm. It's a big, now, especially nowadays, a big tourist area. So a lot of people vacation up there now. But back then, it wasn't very well known. And my parents kind of moved there to get away from big city life. Right. They're like, let's get out of here.
Where did they move? Where'd they move from?
Well, so my dad's side of the family is from Chicago, and then my mom's side of the family is from here, Detroit. They lived in Alameda, California on a houseboat for a little while before they moved back to Michigan. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
Valentine, besides that being your last name, what is that?
Italian.
Okay. I didn't want to assume. So dad's side family Italian, both sides Italian?
A little, mostly my dad's side, but my mother's side has Italian in there as well, but mostly on my dad's side.
Okay. What was that like growing up with an Italian family?
Wow. It's great. So I'm like 3rd generation, so I don't really speak Italian. I had a chance to study abroad there during college, but we were far removed except for traditions, cooking and holidays and that sort of stuff. So it was always fun being in Chicago, mostly for the holidays and cooking, these huge meals, of course, pasta and cannolis and all that stuff.
That's what I'm here for.
I still like to do today.
Rifino, That's what I'm here for. I'm here for the food stories, really. I've interviewed a few Italians and from Italian families, and it's all about the Sunday sauce, the Sunday gravy.
We call it gravy.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Phew, I said it right. Um,
Yep.
but you grew up in a family, I guess my point is you grew up in a family where food and family were very important, sounds like.
Food and family for sure. For sure.
Mhm. Okay, so you grew up in this small area outside Detroit. What was that? I mean, what was that like?
Well, so, you know, I got to give a lot of credit to my parents. You know, you're product of how you grew up, and they really were trailblazers. I mean, this would have been when they moved up to this farm. They moved up there to essentially live off the land. You know, they were kind of sick and tired of the commercialization, and this is back then in the mid to late 60s. So we grew most of what we ate. I grew up drinking goat's milk, which I still can't stand to this day, probably. But you know, that sort of thing. We had chickens, goats, and just gardening and farming, and it was kind of this whole thing of it, let's get back to nature, kind of get back to the things that matter. I
Right.
think was basically what they wanted to do.
Well, and it always sounds really good to do that, but it's also a hard life because you're dependent so much on Mother Nature and again, if you're living off the land, some years are probably good, some aren't.
It's a very difficult life, and but I think that gave my brother and I a lot of lessons too. You know, nothing comes easy, nothing's handed to you, and you got to work for what you get.
I was just going to say, yeah, you have to work for stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
which I think today, people kind of forget about it, maybe.
Oh, I totally agree. I think it's one of those ideas where you can't just sit and let things come to you. And if you think that way, it's just going to be a really hard life for you. You have to work. You have to like go get the things that you want somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
So school, college, what did you want to do growing up?
See, I mean, I really had no idea. Um, yeah, like I think like a lot, but it was I was very fortunate. Fortune, a lot of luck. Um, as I look back on everything and kind of the way things laid out, you know, very little or seemingly inconsequential decisions at the time, really shaped and guided the rest of my life. And the one thing that I really remember that really changed a lot for me was what was I? I was 8 or 9 years old and went from a basketball camp practice, saw this wrestling practice happening in a different gymnasium, and just kind of went to the mat and stayed there. And that really just changed everything because that got me out to the East Coast for school, out to Cornell, was recruited to wrestle there. And then, being there, being around all those people, and then moving to New York City after college. I mean, that all was kind of precipitated on that one little random decision when I was a little kid.
Isn't that
So a lot of
interesting how that
luck. Yeah,
happens?
it
Right?
is. It
Like you
really
you
is. Yeah.
literally walked to a different gym and that changed the next few years of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. What was it like going to Cornell?
I, you know, growing up on a farm in a real small community, you, you're just not exposed, I don't
Hmm.
think, to a lot. And, as much, we were very well educated, and, not like that kind of exposure, but I don't know, just different people and different thoughts. And going out to Cornell, you got people from all over the world, really.
Yeah.
And, people who expect to be the best. Like they're not like, hey, let's just kind of slog through this. Like we got people who are, very, very talented. And just to see that kind of mindset, see those kind of people and be around them, I think was probably the most attractive or eye-opening
Yeah.
thing for me from being from a small town.
Was it a motivator for you to be around people who were constantly pushing to be better and be good?
It's a huge motivation. I mean, and I think more than motivation, it's almost just um, it's a mindset,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where these people, and I'm generalizing, but especially on the wrestling team, I mean, some of these guys, Olympians and All Americans and national champions and stuff like that, you can't be around them without that kind of mindset rubbing off, and that kind of mindset of, you know, there's nothing saying that I shouldn't be the best. There's nothing standing in my way. Like, I control my own destiny. And, that was real eye opening for me, I think. And that influenced the rest of my life a lot too.
Oh, it's amazing. My husband was a wrestler in high school, very good wrestler. So occasionally when we play wrestle, I lose every single time. There's just no, don't even try, essentially.
My wife has learned that lesson too. Every now and then she thinks like, all right, this is the time.
Get them. Were you a good wrestler? Obviously.
No, I wasn't.
Oh, come on.
No, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, and going out to the East Coast, I was very, very average as it turned out.
From what I know, very little what I know about wrestling is that it is a lot of mind over matter, right? I mean, you're thinking about the next move and then the move like 2 moves ahead.
Yeah, I mean, coaches often say, when you think, you stink, in the sense of you weren't thinking, but you had practiced it so many times that it just became natural to respond and react in those certain ways. And I think, what that means is it's that mental toughness to do that thousands and thousands of times. It's that mental toughness where your body says, I can't go further. And then your mind takes over and says, you will go further.
Wow.
That's the mental toughness. I think that, the wrestling, it's a great sport.
So speaking of mental toughness, that was a nice little segue into your day job after Cornell, because you went to New York City.
Yeah.
You were a day trader.
That's right.
So
that's right. I did a couple different jobs on Wall Street, but okay. Yeah.
So when I read that, day trading stocks, I stupidly instantly thought of the Wolf on Wall Street, the movie that I just watched with Leonardo DiCaprio. And I was like, Rifino did that? And I know that's not the case, but explain to me day trading stocks. What is that?
So it's funny that you bring up the Wolf of Wall Street, because one of my first jobs there, not knowing anything, right? I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll take whatever kind of job I can get. It was a job similar to the Wolf of Wall Street. And, very quickly you realize, like, this is insane. This is nuts. This is not for me. It was the worst. It was the worst experience of my life.
Wow.
And so it didn't last very long, but I actually worked with a few guys who had worked with Jordan Belfort and all this stuff.
Oh my gosh, crazy.
Yeah. So, this was towards the end of that time period. This was the early 90s. Mm-hmm. Yep. Early 90s. So there were leftovers from that, but day trading was very rewarding, and a lot like wrestling. I'm going to put everything towards wrestling.
Yeah.
But it was a very independent. What you put into it, you could get out of it. You weren't reliant on anybody else. It was all up to you. So all my life I've had jobs where it wasn't just sitting there collecting a paycheck and, going through the things. It was everything where if you didn't work, you weren't going to make any money. So it was rewarding in that sense. And it was at the early days we were one of the first groups of day traders, at that time. So it was fun. And it was pretty groundbreaking, or pioneering.
Stressful?
I think other people would have different. Yeah, it was pretty stressful. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that whole lifestyle is stressful.
Well, I think when you say because it is all dependent on you, right? Like making money and being successful is dependent on you and what you put into it. I think that alone would be just that kind of that burden would be stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's and just the lifestyle. But it was, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. You're young, doing financially very well in New York City. Like what more could you ask for? Especially a little farm boy, not knowing much. So it was a good time.
How long did you do that for?
I, almost 10 years. I
Okay.
think no, 10 years at least, 10 or 11 years.
So I know that you started the distillery like 2007, 2008.
Yeah, I mean, officially, I got our first product on the shelf in 2007.
Okay. Wow.
I'd
Okay.
started working on the business plan in 2005, and 2005, 2006, we're developing the recipes for for a lot of our products.
So I guess what changed for you? What switched? Because you're in New York City, you're day trading stocks, you're living a successful life, what sounds like, and then you just said at some point, I'm done with this. I want to open up a distillery.
It was one of those just life moments where I kind of said to myself, like, is this what you want to do with the rest of your life?
Mm.
And while it was a fun, I could call it fun, I guess, for lack of a better word, but while it was fun, it wasn't rewarding in the sense of my life was distilled, no pun intended, was distilled to this number on a computer screen.
Mhm.
And that was it. And it was like, are you really doing anything? Are you adding to the economy? What really are you doing? And it wasn't rewarding. So it was one of those moments where it was just like, if you're not going to do it now, if you're not going to do what you want to do now, what are you waiting for? What are you going to do? So, literally bar napkin idea one night to quitting the next day and starting the business plan.
So why a distillery?
It's a good question. A couple of reasons. I'd always been fascinated by the microbreweries. And I think or a couple of things that fascinated me with them was, the sense of the big companies are kind of ruining this category. Budweiser compared to, a real beer. Um, and then the other part of it was the mechanical aspect of it, all these tanks and the engineering behind it, that part of it, coupled with the creative part behind it. So you got to create a product and then create brands, that go with that product. So I'd always been fascinated with that. I brewed beer in college with one of my buddies, in a big garbage can in our apartment, just homebrew. And so around the time that I'm thinking about, what I want to do, it was like, hey, you could do the same thing with distilled spirits that not really many people have done yet. At that time there were maybe a couple dozen around the country. It's still really a
Yeah.
nascent time in
Well,
this industry.
I read at the time that you opened Valentine Distilling Company, there were 15 to 20 micro distilleries in the United States. Now there's more than 2,000.
It
So,
was over 2000. Yeah, so it grew rapidly. That and that was one of the difficult things at that time was there were really not many, if any, paths to follow. There weren't,
right.
companies to kind of compare yourself to, or I want to be like that or whatever. So it really, for a lot of reasons, was jumping into the unknown, in a in a big way.
Also, not the best time in our country to open up a new business. I mean, that was like 2008. That was when a lot of cities, major cities were suffering, and Detroit was certainly on that list.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I came to Detroit. It was kind of funny. Well, so being a trader, I love buying low. So 2007, 2008, it didn't get much lower at that point.
Right.
So, buying or starting a business, I think, it turned out to be, it was not a bad decision. But Detroit in particular, and it was funny at that time, Detroit was still the butt of everybody's joke. Now it's become cool, several years later, it's become the cool hip place to be. But back then it was like, so my investors were like, you got to get Detroit off your label. Like, you can't have Detroit on a bottle,
Yeah.
a high-end bottle of spirits. Like, you can't have that on there. And I was like, no, it'll be okay. Like, it's cool. Don't worry.
And you were adamant to keep Detroit, the city's name. You were adamant keeping that on the label.
Yeah. I mean, this is the maybe not still, but this was the manufacturing capital of the world. You look back on it, Detroit used to be called the Paris of the Midwest. I mean, this was a booming Midwestern city because of all that manufacturing. Detroit wasn't the only place, but I think it was the epicenter. But, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Minneapolis, this is where we built stuff. Some of the best stuff in the world was built here. It's the Industrial Revolution forward or whatever. But so it was symbolic for a lot of reasons of like, let's show the rest of the world that Detroit still builds the best stuff in the world. That kind of thing was a lot of it for us.
Well, let's go back a little bit to 2007, 2008. You're starting this micro distillery. I mean, what challenges were you facing?
I mean, everything was a challenge.
Yeah.
Everything from, local government, since this wasn't a category or a business that anybody knew about yet, even local governments, the fire marshals of different cities would be like, we can't do this here. You can't have, explosive. You can't be making flammable explosive stuff and storing it there. And it's like, so even from just a local government standpoint, it was just like, no, you can't do this. And, what are you thinking? So all those kind of hurdles. And then I think probably the biggest hurdle was this hadn't been done before. So, how do you compete with these massive conglomerates that are dominating the space right now?
Right.
And that's why, knowing my business plan, it's funny as I look back on it, 2008 was kind of a turning point for a lot of ways. After 2008, people, for the first time cared about local things made locally. Before 2000, you didn't hear a peep about, hey, maybe we should buy local, maybe we should support these local things. And so when I looked back at my business plan years later, I didn't have local in there. It was not even a thought of we're going to sell these products, using this locally made or whatever. So still to this day, I kind of shy away from locally made. I tend to refer to us more as a regional manufacturer. But that wasn't in the business plan. So I really felt like we better make products that compete nationally, internationally on quality, or this just isn't going to work. Right. This is just going to be, a lot of money going up in flames. If we're not able to compete on quality. So that was the driving force behind this. Knowing that, manufacturing is an economic driver. That was part of the Detroit thing too, is we got to get this place back on the, not that we're responsible for the turnaround in Detroit, but we do generate over $1 million a year in tax revenues. Our little company, our tiny little company. So that was always important, knowing that supply chain and that sort of thing. People kind of forget. 2008 is another example. The auto industry.
Yeah.
And there was a big stink of whether we're going to save the auto companies or we're not going to save the auto companies. And I think in a lot of, wherever you stand on that issue, I think in a lot of people's minds, it was the assembly line worker, the person working on the assembly line in GM. Ford didn't take any of the money, so use GM. But it's way more than that. In this area, especially, all the secondary and tertiary suppliers to the big three are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people,
Yeah.
making the different knobs or whatever's going into a car. So it's more than just that first thing, it's that whole supply chain. So was another reason, like, let's bring this manufacturing here and see if we can't, show that it works and can be done.
Yeah, do something. So how did you, in the beginning there, make yourself stand out, make Valentine Distilling Company stand out? Because it's, when you walk into a liquor store, better probably than anyone, the shelves are full of all sorts of vodka, whiskey, bourbon. So how do you make your product stand out?
That was one of those things where if I had known what I didn't know, what's the saying? If I had known what I didn't know, I probably wouldn't have done it. That was one of those things where my gosh, I did not know what I was kind of getting into. And, in those early days, this was probably impossible to do today. I mean, I started this thing on, a shoestring and some duct tape, essentially.
Yeah.
We weren't really well funded. It was just a true grassroots, which I think is fun because it would be very, very hard to replicate it today like that. But walking into, after spending the whole day making the products, and then walking into a liquor store and, talking to the owner, usually the owner is the buyer in a liquor stores are small business owners too, most of them. And, saying, hey, this is my product. Would you like to try it? And they just couldn't wrap their head around it. They're like, oh, you're a rep for some company, or no, I made this. This is mine. And it really was just one customer at a time. Wow. And, it's the way it was. One tasting at a time, one customer, convinced one person to do it, and then, just word of mouth. And that's really how we've grown. We don't have a huge advertising budget still to this day. So it really was one account, one person at a time in those early days.
I happen to love that story. I feel like I worked in TV for a very long time, and my general manager, who was my general manager for more than a decade, would tell us all the time, you get viewers one at a time, one viewer at a time. And that's how you slowly over the years gain trust and confidence in viewers. And it's the same now as you're growing your business and I'm growing my business. It's one person at a time, right? And I mean, it's that slow, organic push that you're doing. You really believe in your product. And I think people see that. They see your passion for this. They see your fire for this. And they're like, hey, I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah. It's funny that you say a TV. So you look at TV stations and you're like, wow, these are giant. And it's true. It's one viewer at a time. This goes into a bunch of different areas for me, but, we've kind of lost that, I think, where now it's, we're not starting this tech company with less than $10 billion and we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to buy all of our users or our customers or whatever it is. We're just going to buy them. And we're starting to see that in this industry now too. I mean, huge Wall Street money is coming in for a startup, and so it spans all different things. And I think, the American story, the American dream is to start something from scratch and grow it into, something bigger.
Mm-hmm. That gave me goosebumps. I agree. Um, and I guess for you, looking back now, you really had to have some rough patches in starting this company. But now you look at what you've produced. I just want to read this. Your bourbon consistently rated some of the best in the world. The Valentine vodka, world's best by World Vodka Awards in London, 2016, 2017. So back to back there. You started this from scratch on a bar napkin. Do you look back sometimes and you're just like, man, like, does it almost seem like a dream? Does it seem a little unreal?
Not, not yet. Fortunately, I do get some time to reflect on what we've done. Usually it's, so you see, I'm here in the distillery. This is
Mm-hmm.
why I'm here every day. I'm still, intricately involved in it.
Yeah.
So I don't get a lot of time to reflect, but usually if I'm here late at night, nobody else is here, the distillery is kind of dark, I look at it and go, that was pretty cool, what we've been able to do. But by the same token, we still got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is not this is the beginning of the road. I call it like we're in phase 2 out of 4 or 5
Nice.
different phases. So yeah, I mean it's fun to look back on it, but we're always working and always got more places to go.
Well, I mean, you have to, right? Otherwise, your only option is complacency. You have to keep growing. You have to keep pushing. Um, are you still considered a micro distillery, or have you pushed
Yeah,
out?
we're
Okay.
definitely. I mean, so even though we're one of the one of the older ones in this space, what we make in a year, the big companies spill in a day.
Wow.
So we still are just incredibly tiny in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it makes it a little sweeter then to look back and
Yeah,
see the growth and see that one customer at a time. I mean, that makes it so much sweeter.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, to give you an example, we're in I think 10 or 11 states right now. So, even in this country, we have a ways to go. But
Is the goal all 50?
I mean, the goal is to really put this industry on the map, put to get back to a place where we had regional distilleries, where it wasn't all controlled by 6 or 7
Mm-hmm.
publicly traded companies. That's the real goal, is to, because I think the impact just economically and in other ways, we got to try to find some way back in not just this industry, but a lot of industries.
So agree. Oh, so agree. When you started this, was that the goal to, distribution wise, was that the goal to get it in a lot of states, or did you want to kind of keep it local in the beginning, or did you even know?
Well, I really didn't know at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, but now what I've kind of figured out and what I like to do is we try to grow organically and strategically. So we could be in 40 states right now. A lot of those states wouldn't be doing a lot of business. So we're trying to be in a few states, do well in those states, and then expand from there as we get stronger and stronger as a company, and the name out there
Mm-hmm.
more and more well known.
For sure.
Um, yeah,
And right now you're distilling vodka, bourbon, gin. What am I missing?
rye whiskey
Rye
basically is the
whiskey.
only thing. Yeah, so we have a couple different kinds of vodka. We have a couple different kinds of gin.
Mm-hmm.
We have, I think, 7 or 8 different SKUs of bourbon and rye whiskey. So yeah, while that may sound like a lot, it's really not a lot of different products. Um, basically 3 different kind of products. Everyone is like, why don't you do, rums and all this other stuff? And my philosophy on that has always been, I just want to do a couple things and do them well.
Yeah.
It's it might be uh, it might seem like an easy way to grow, and it is an easy way to grow at first just by putting more SKUs and products out there. But I think long term, at least that's the decision that I've made. We want to keep it to just these three and do well,
Sure.
make them well, I guess.
Well, quality over quantity, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the whole. So really, I mean, that's how this thing started, was this quality conversation. Maybe I'm jumping ahead. I don't know, but
Jump. Go for it.
okay.
Jump ahead.
So, my Wall Street days really kind of pointed out to me of what direction we have been heading and still are heading as a country, as a world, really. And I look at it in the manufacturing sense, but it really can apply to a lot of different things. But so on Wall Street, it became all about profits and what your profits are going to be next quarter.
Mm.
So for a company, instead of, well, let me start here. Let's start where, I talked a little bit about the Midwest and the manufacturing that we used to do. Companies used to become great by making a great product. Growing up on the farm, I use John Deere as an example. When I was a little kid, we bought a tractor used. I think it was late 50s, early 60s, John Deere tractor. My dad still drives that today. He still uses it.
Isn't that crazy?
That's insane.
Yeah.
You think about things you purchase nowadays, you hope they last, a move in your apartment. You hope the furniture lasts like one move, let alone handing it down to your grandkids.
I know.
And it and it just occurred to me that the shift went from let's make a great product, let's become great by making a great product, to let's make as much money as we can. And I guess you can't fault a publicly traded company for that. That's what they're built for. But as a customer, I just really felt shortchanged. I felt you're kind of screwing me, and you don't really respect your own customers. So the whole idea behind this company was, let's just get back to basics.
Yeah.
Let's put the product first. I need to be profitable, or else we're not going to be around for 16 years, so we need to be profitable, but I don't need a 300-foot yacht with a crew, sailing around the Caribbean, the Mediterranean. I'll take a nice fishing boat. Actually, I'm a pilot, so I'll take a nice little, Cessna or something. I don't need a, private jet,
right,
or whatever. It's just like, let's realign some values and just kind of put things in perspective. So that was really the whole impetus of, like, let's get away from this profit driven thing where it's kind of a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
As a customer, all of our choices for products are becoming just the cheapest things that we can get. Even luxury things are made as cheaply as they can be.
Absolutely. I wanted to text my Uncle Randy in South Carolina and ask how long he's had his John Deere tractor, because I grew up also, with a Southern family that grew everything, and we had John Deere tractors. Sorry, I just want to ask him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's great. It would be interesting, especially to see, because they've been making tractors from the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So,
but they're a great success story.
Exactly. And I think you hit on something for me, realigning our values. Do you feel like if more companies would really focus on that and sort of change that mindset that you just described, you think things would be a little different in the world?
I think things would be a lot different. Yeah. And, yeah, and it's not just the customer experience, of course, but I think that trickles down in a lot of different ways. But here we are, and what are you going to do about it? Let's show that this model kind of works too.
It seems like way back then you wanted to open a distillery, yes, but there was something deeper happening, which you just described.
I mean, again, that from the non-rewarding Wall Street days,
Yeah.
it was like, let's do something rewarding,
Mm.
Personally, and hopefully for society too. I don't want to get too deep in that because I
Sure.
am making alcohol, so it's not
Hey,
rewarding
we
in
need
every
it.
sense of the word.
We need it.
But in my mind, it's like if you're going to do something, there's got to be a bigger picture to it.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be, let's make as much money as we can. Let's, sell as much as we can. There's got to be something else behind it, or what the hell are we doing?
Totally.
As people, what are we doing?
There's got to
So
be
there's
a
gotta
why.
be-
There's got to be a why.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm saving the world here, but
You don't know.
I hope there is a bigger purpose behind what
Yeah,
we do.
for sure. My Uncle Randy just got back to me and he said the one he has now, he's had for 2.5 years. The one before he had for 20.
There you go.
This is not a
And-
commercial for John Deere.
Well, it's funny. So John Deere now is a publicly traded company,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot has probably changed
Sure.
in those times. But
So let's talk about distilling a little bit. Is there any one alcohol that's like more challenging than the other?
that's a good question. Yes, I think there is, and my answer is a lot of people will kind of scoff at it because probably the least respected product, which is vodka, publicly is the least respected. I think is the hardest one to make properly
Okay.
because there is no room for error. The slightest mistake in any part of the process, you're gonna taste it.
Mm.
And we're not talking about production vodkas, because production vodkas. So this is, from the largest company. That's what I call the production vodkas.
Okay.
Anything made at scale. It's different. What we do is the way it was made 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago. Pretty recent.
Okay.
Most of vodka is not made like that anymore. Nowadays, you can essentially take industrial ethanol, put enough additives in it to make it drinkable, slap a fancy label on there, and call it good. And that's from the high end on down. That's what happens nowadays. So we're really just going back, and not that long, 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
and distilling it the way it was meant to be made. When you distill it like that, any mistake in the process, you're going to taste, because vodka by definition is odorless, colorless, and flavorless.
Right.
So that begs another question is, well, how do you differentiate yourself? It's a whole other conversation from everything. If it's odorless, colorless, and flavorless, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you win the world championships 2 years in a row? And the answer to that is you get down to other sensory perception of, texture and viscosity and linger, those sort of attributes. But so in answer to your question, any mistake, you're going to taste it in vodka.
Mm-hmm.
Bourbon, the youngest bourbon we sell is 5 years old. That's sitting in a barrel for 5 years.
Man.
If there was a little mistake or a little differentiation, that's going to come out as some unique characteristic 5-6 years later. So that the vodka, the least respected product, in my opinion, is the hardest one to make, quality wise.
So you say you're distilling it like it was distilled even 50 years ago. How is that? So what is that process?
So traditionally in pot stills. The still you see behind me is
Uh-huh.
not the vodka still. That's mainly our whiskey still.
Okay.
Let's see if we can.
Mm.
The high low is kind of blocking it, but you see those tall columns.
Yeah.
This is a pot still hooked up to reflux columns, rectification columns, and that's the traditional way. Where incidentally, a very large brand, been in business, I think from the 17 or 1800s, distilled their product that way up until 30 or 40 years ago. Then, of course, when they sold the family owned business to a publicly traded company, they used to have pictures of these stills right on the back of their label.
Yeah.
Of course, they sell those, kind of disappear off the label
Ugh,
because they go to the industrial ethanol model.
that's so
And that
sad.
includes putting additives, right? It's and to me, it's not hard. All it is a couple pennies, a couple nickels here and there. So what are we trading for that?
Seriously.
What are you trading to save a couple cents on a cocktail? It's like you're
Wow.
trading addition of chemicals. You're just trading you're trading a lot of weight.
That's really sad. That's really, really sad. Um, as other micro distilleries started to open, how have you, and you've kind of already answered this, but it sounds like the way you stay relevant is by what you just described, really getting back to how, to the root of how things are distilled by taking your time, by, having whiskey and bourbon in barrels for 5 years and that patience that comes along with that.
Yeah. So, having been in business for 16 years has given us a little advantage in the sense that we can wait for our whiskey to age.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, a lot of places can get in a rush to get their whiskey. You need money coming in somehow. You can't wait,
Right.
5 or 6 years. And so, a lot end up not. You don't have to. You can sell it at, 2 years old is a minimum for a bourbon. So just the time that we've had and that willingness to wait for it, I think differentiates us. But I have a hard time comparing ourselves to other craft distilleries, I guess, in the sense of I like what every craft is doing. I'd rather compare ourselves to the multinational publicly traded companies,
Mm-hmm.
where their headquarters are halfway around the world and they really, could care less what's happening on the ground
Yeah.
where their products are sold. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Where's our stock price
Oh, yuck. Yuck, yuck. Do you have a favorite?
of my products?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite
Everybody asks me
child?
that.
Do
It's
you
it's
which
funny. That's my answer. It's like
who's
picking it's like picking your child. But so I usually escape that question that way. But in all sincerity, I kind of go with, however I'm feeling, but usually with seasons.
mm,
Spring and summer are the clear spirits.
yep.
So gin
Yep.
and vodkas. As you start getting into the fall and winter, that's where we have a barrel aged gin. So we actually age one of our gins, gives it a deep, hearty,
Mm-hmm.
profile. And then, of course, the bourbon and the rye in the colder months.
Hell
So
yeah.
that's kind of the way I go.
Agreed. I usually am on that same path. Um, Looking back at your career so far, because you're not done, would you consider yourself a pioneer in this industry?
I would like to think that,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and I think, even if you look at our home state, um, we are one of the leading 3 or 4 states, with the most amount of craft distilleries.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that we've at least played some part in that. and showing people around here that, hey, this is a viable business, but B, one that helps our local economy.
Yeah.
Like I said, our small company, we still are small, generates $1 million for mostly for the state of Michigan. A lot of federal taxes in there too, but you know, that's a decent impact
Yeah.
for a small company. We have 16 or 18 employees here, so
Nothing to scoff
not
at
a,
for sure.
not a huge, yeah.
What does that fire marshal say about your, your company now? uh,
It's funny. So a lot of the municipalities that didn't want us at first
yeah.
now, of course, have other craft distilleries.
They're coming home making a cocktail with the Valentine
Yeah,
Distilling
yeah,
Company booze. I also read somewhere that you guys have a swanky little bar.
yeah. So right here where I'm sitting is where we make everything. This is
Yeah.
the distillery, but we've only been here 8 or 9 years. Before that, the production was all in our other building where we had the production in the back in about 3,000 square feet, and then a 700 square foot like cocktail lounge in front of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we outgrew that, moved the production over here, and then now that building is the cocktail lounge,
Love it.
and it's a fun place to be. You know, I hope when you walk in there, you get the sense of you could be in any decade. This could have been here 50
Nice.
years ago. This could have been here yesterday. Just kind of a timeless kind of quality to it.
I'm sure this depends on kind of your mood and what you're feeling when it comes to a drink, but are you a cocktail guy? Are you just like a on the rocks kind of guy?
I'm a big cocktail guy.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, but simple cocktails, just a
Yes.
couple ingredients,
Yes.
is enough for me. I don't get into it. And we get a little bit fancy over at the lounge. You got to give the people what they want,
Sure.
but for for the most part, it's simple cocktails with just good ingredients. I mean, go figure.
I know.
Like it's not rocket science,
It
right?
really isn't. Yeah. In this house, we're big like whiskey lemon.
You know,
That's it. I mean, it's
yeah,
just when you're drinking, in my opinion, when you're drinking good booze, you don't have to add a lot of junk to it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's where cocktails started, was prohibition, when you weren't
Yep.
getting a lot of a lot of good booze, so you had to
Exactly.
cover it up.
Exactly. We're going to wrap up a little bit and get to the final three, but I just want to say this has been the most pleasant and eye-opening conversation.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure of mine. It's been great speaking with you.
It's very it's inspirational and humbling to hear you talk about, really you were doing more than just opening up a distillery. You're really trying to get back to, this the idea that this country was founded on, right? Hard work.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Well, thank you. I
it's
mean,
pretty
that means
awesome.
the world to me. Thank you.
Well, I the message that you laid down for me today, I'm picking up every single bit of it, and I'm going to be listening to this later and taking notes. So, thank you for opening up and being just like brutally honest when it comes to that. I appreciate it. Rufino, we're going to wrap up and get to the final three. Best advice you've ever been given. And I'm praying it's coming from like a wrestling coach.
I mean, it could have come from a
Okay.
wrestling
Okay.
coach. It actually didn't, but and I don't know if it's necessarily advice, but someone told me a long time ago, there are three types of people: people who watch things happen, people who make things happen, and people who go, "What the heck just happened?"
Nice.
It's like, which one of those do you want to be?
Which one of those do you think you are?
Well, I hope I'm make things happen.
Yeah, I would agree. That was an easy test. You passed. What's your happy place?
uh, in the pilot's seat of my Cessna 182, my clubs. I don't own a Cessna, but my flying club Cessna 182, going anywhere,
Yeah.
just up in the air flying. It's really liberating, I think.
We didn't actually talk about that. When did you get your pilot's license?
Actually, I got it years ago when I was still living in New York City, but it's something I always wanted to do. And it is just one of those times where you're not thinking about anything else, anything that's happening during the day, that just all melts away.
Well, let's hope when you're that high in the sky that you're not thinking about anything else,
Right.
and you're just. My stepdad's a pilot and was an instructor too, and I just have lots of nice memories and some scary ones of being in very small planes.
That's probably my wife's opinion too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Dodging thunderstorms.
Exactly fun.
Nope. Well, awesome. And then in all things food and drink, what do you crave, sir?
So right now, it snowed up here.
Uh-huh.
We're getting more snow. So right now, all I'm thinking about is like real Mexican food and a Corona.
Yes.
Sitting on a beach with authentic tacos and a Corona.
Yes. Yes, sir. I thought you were going to go like a big bowl of hot soup or something, but no, you're dreaming about warm weather right now.
That's right. That's
okay.
Right.
Really quickly before I say goodbye to you, where could people find your booze? What states are you in right now?
So we're primarily right now in the Midwest and a little bit in the Mid-Atlantic.
Okay.
However, almost every state can order from one of our partners, our partner liquor stores. So on our website, there's a link, and you can actually mail order most of our products to almost every state.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's make a
push. If you're not around here, you can easily get it.
Yeah. And let's make a push to support your fantastic company, Valentine Distilling Company, Rifino Valentine, president and founder. Again, thank you so much for just sharing your story. And I am rooting for you all the way from Oregon. I am just supporting you as best as I can.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma with me, Trish Close. You can watch this podcast and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Just search Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma. You can also listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.